All right, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Paul Rozeboom. In the previous video, we have been stripping apart the 93 Toyota Supra, getting ready for restoration. Now, we ended that video off on some rust. So alongside with fixing that rust, what I'm actually going to be doing is replacing the trans tunnel and shaving the engine bay in this video. But before all that begins, I want to start with washing the engine bay. Here we go. Okay, so is that perfect? Absolutely not, but it'll give me a lot better surface area to start working on when I do dive into the engine bay. I'm not gonna have all that grease and grime to deal with. So now let's go ahead and start tackling that rust. Okay, so having the rust right here is actually gonna work out really well for us considering what we plan on doing with the car. So let me talk you through that. All right, so the idea is actually going to be running a wider tire in the back here, but in order to do that, because the tire would normally rub right here if you're running too wide of a tire, I'm gonna have to cut out a section and then recess it back. But while I'm doing that, I'm gonna have access to the channel that runs right there. So with that gone, that panel gone right there, I'll be able to get to the inside and clean out the rust that's right there and then sandblast it and shoot some primer. And then we'll have it all welded up and recessed in and run a wider tire. So we're getting like two things done while doing one job. So this is pretty ideal. So I think the plan is going to be to open this section up just a little bit more right through here. So I'll cut it through there, and then that way when I do make a new piece to put in here, all I have to do is weld that section instead of like a long strip. So I think that'll be ideal. And then once this section's removed, we can get a better visual on what's going on with the rust. If I have to take apart all of this bracing and everything, and then clean up these panels and then re-weld them back in, I'm not sure yet. So let's go ahead and start making some room. So actually, huge win. This thing actually is not as far gone as I thought it would be. As you saw, I started taking this reinforcement bracket off, but I started prying up the bottom here, and we can see, I don't know if you guys can see that, underneath there is not rusted. So I'm just going to leave the bracket in there, clean up the rust the way it is, and then just weld it back up, because removing that's going to be a lot of work. So let's just leave it where it is and then just move on. So that is cleaning up pretty well. There's just a tiny little strip right here that I gotta finish cleaning up. Yeah, really happy that it's coming out. I thought that would be a lot worse than what it was. It is pretty good. So now I gotta figure out how to get inside of here now and clean up that rust down there. That'll be interesting. I don't know if I'll be able to film that. I'll maybe just do a little before and after here. so here is my plan. You saw I just finished up hammering the section in right there. So that's looking a lot better. A lot more room was given. Now it does hammer the inside of the car in just a little bit. So I have to go in and probably just add some new seam sealer. But my plan for this now, the bottom is I drew like a rough line right here. So I have to clean up those welds. Just ignore that for now. But I'm going to cut along that rough line, and then we'll like remove like a section on the outside where like the lip kind of is, and then we'll be able to push it in just a little bit so that way we keep this lip and then weld it all back up. So the lip is still there because that's adding a bit more reinforcement, just trying to keep it as strong as possible. All of this like metal right here though, this is actual like frame. So this stuff is pretty strong. It's pretty sturdy stuff. So it's probably going to take a bit of work to get this all where I want it, but we'll do our best. So here we go. Okay, while we wait for the epoxy primer to dry, I got a brand new OEM manual transmission tunnel. So let's go ahead and get this put in. Okay, so because we are replacing the trans tunnel with an OEM one, it's pretty straightforward. All we have to do is drill out all of the spot welds. I'm not too sure how many are on here, but yeah, I'll go ahead now and start getting this drilled out, and then we can get the automatic one dropped out, and then we can put the manual one in. So as you can see, I have the panel in, the weld through primer is on, so we can go ahead and start welding. Obviously now it's real important to make sure we have the panel in the correct spot. I went through and clamped the back, and then I bolted it down, and then because there's not much room to get clamps through there, I can move the clamps to the front. So the goal is to make sure there's no real air gap in between where we're welding and like maybe the seams and stuff. So this clamp would go on first to remove the air gap towards the top of the body. And then this clamp will suck it into the side so the weld gets nice and snug. So that way there's not gonna be really any gap. And then when we weld, that weld through primer will actually like melt and solidify around the weld, protecting it from rust. So yeah, we'll go ahead now and start welding this all up. So I did leave a gap underneath here. Let me show you that. Okay, you can see the gap there. So as you saw, that gap was there so I could get a pry bar or vice grips in between. That way I can pry up onto the actual spots that I'm welding. The reason for that is to try and make sure the panels are like the same angle and orientation. So that way when they're welded, you're not gonna have like a degree angle or whatever that's mismatching. So hopefully this is all good now. It's all kind of tacked in place, and the goal now will be to stretch this panel. Hopefully I can get a decent stretch on it, and we'll stretch it into place so it tucks up and closes up that gap, and then we can weld everything up. So hopefully this goes well. If not, I'm gonna have to cut this out and do it again with a preformed panel. So hopefully this works. Shaving some of these bumps right here in the engine bay. So some of these the owner does not want. So we'll go ahead and start knocking these down. All right, next I need to cut a hole in the apron right here. We're gonna do like a 4-inch hole right there. That's gonna be for the intercooler piping, and I have the template that I use for my car from Powerhouse Racing. Even got their shirt on, so that worked out pretty good. So let's go ahead and cut the hole. Okay, so my plan is to actually sandblast the engine bay. Usually I just do it by hand, stripping it all down to bare metal, but I'm going to try sandblasting just to try and speed up the process, so in the future I can do the same techniques, just keep refining what I'm doing so I can get it faster and faster. That means cheaper for the customer. But normally I don't do it because what happens is you'll sandblast all this, and what will happen is you'll get tons of sand inside of the frame rails and stuff. Way more than you would think would happen, like way more than you think would happen. You have to try and blow it all out. But usually what happens is you can't blow it all out, and it gets stuck in like the crevices and joints and stuff. And then while you're going down the road, because the car's vibrating, it's slowly like sanding away at the inside of your frame rail. Then eventually you're just gonna get rust, and it's gonna rust from the inside out. So that's usually why I don't like sandblasting, and I'm trying this out where I plugged all of the holes. I made backing plates for the firewall and stuff, just so that way we're not getting crazy amount of sand on the inside. And then I'll just remove all the tape and everything, and then we'll just sand out all the little areas. This should be much faster and much more efficient in the future for me. So hopefully this works out and we don't get sand inside of the frame rail. So yeah, here we go. Wish me luck. All right, as you can see, I went ahead and removed all of the seam sealer. So all that seam sealer is basically removed. I cut some of the stuff just in the back. That should be fine. But after removing the seam sealer, we can see we have some like a little spots of rust underneath. So you can see that over here, there's some. So I'm just gonna go ahead and sandblast the whole thing one more time, do a really good sandblasting pass, and then I'll just quickly dust over it with a DA, and we should just about be ready to get it in epoxy primer. All right, I got some primer mixed up, so we'll go ahead and spray some epoxy primer in the engine bay. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going around the car, removing all of like the little clips and everything. So getting all the clips removed, and then I found a little spot of rust right here on the recorder panel in between. So I'm just going to drill out the spot welds that are right there. And then I'm just gonna bend the panel back, and we'll clean up the rust, do some weld through primer, then weld that back together. So we don't have to cut anything out. Okay, so with the engine bay now in primer, before we go ahead and move on to the rest of the body and get that in primer, there's one more thing that I want to do metalwork wise, so let me show you. And that is going to be doing a battery relocation. Now, most people will relocate the battery to the trunk right about here. They'll just relocate it there. What I'm thinking is we move this foam out. We'll have to probably trim this foam at some point, but let's do a drop box right down here. So the battery will kind of drop in there and it'll give it a little bit cleaner look. That way you can keep your spare tire and everything. This is something that I wish I was gonna do on my car, or wish I did on my car. I'm actually probably gonna do that in the future. So this will be a fun test. Now the only thing to keep in mind with doing the battery relocation right here is the underside. And so the underside of the car here, as you can see, it does have a heat shield that sits right here. So we don't have the most room in between there, as much as I would like, but it should be enough where we can drop it in at least like 3 to 4 inches. That should hopefully be enough. And then we'll coat the backside of the heat shield with a high temp coating, so that way we're not getting excess heat into the battery box. So yeah, let's go ahead and get cutting. Okay, so you can see I'm underneath the car right here. I did a line where the box wanted to sit. I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to hit the lip of the frame rail right here. So we're all clear there. I'll drill on the corner point, just a small hole, and then we'll look on the inside and see how that looks. Okay, so underneath here, I went ahead and just got a piece of wood tucked up in there. That'll just be like our gapping spacer for the heat shield, so that way we have a little bit of room in between. That way they're not bumping. And I'll go ahead now and trace a line along the edge. And then we'll trim it down. We're not trying to trim it all the way down. And then we'll weld it up and then I'll trim it all flush and everything. So yeah, hopefully that works. I already put the battery in to test fit it and everything. Just want to make sure it's kind of level, because none of this stuff is level. So I don't want it to look weird when it's done. So play around with this a little minute and then we'll get that trimmed and then weld it in. All right, check it out. I quickly made a bracket that holds the battery in. I think that'll just be temporary. At some point, I'll probably have a cover for the battery. I think that'll be even nicer. But for now, that'll do. So moving on, we can start stripping down the body. Here we go. All right, I am so excited that the body is now in epoxy. We can start moving forward with some other stuff. So let's take a look at what that is. And I think that'll be fixing the rust on the hatch. So we'll start getting this all stripped down and cut out the section if we need to. We'll sandblast it first, see how bad the rust is, and then go from there. But you're gonna have to wait to the next video to see that stuff getting fixed. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here. Make sure you guys hit me that like button. If you haven't subscribed already, please do that. Comment down below. That really helps the YouTube algorithm push my content. So that means the world to me. And I will see you guys in the next one on the Supra restoration.